Benito Mussolini, who was once a powerful leader of Italy, faced a horrible and shameful end. It was one of the most brutal moments in history, and even today, people remember it. Gruesome end: how Mussolini was executed. Benito Mussolini, the notorious leader of Italy, met a grisly and shocking end that still haunts history. His death was not a peaceful or noble conclusion, but a brutal moment that showed the complete collapse of his reign. For many Italians, his end was the turning point that brought a long and dark era of tyranny to a close. In the final days of World War II, as the power of Mussolini and his fascist regime was crumbling, he found himself on the run. With his control over Italy completely lost, he attempted to escape the country and hide from those who had grown angry at his cruel rule. However, his plan failed when Italian partisans captured him. The partisans, who had suffered much under his regime, had finally had enough and were determined to put an end to his power. This capture was not the result of a careful, secret plan, but a chaotic and bitter encounter where anger and justice mixed. Once captured, Mussolini was not treated as a high-ranking leader or as a person with rights. Instead, he was seen as a symbol of cruelty and oppression that needed to be stopped. The partisans quickly decided that Mussolini's time was over and that there was no need for a long trial. They believed that he had already done enough harm to the people of Italy. The decision to execute him was made swiftly, leaving no room for mercy or debate. The actual execution of Mussolini was as brutal as it was decisive. In a short span of time, he was shot by the partisans, ending his life in a violent and stark manner. The act of shooting him was done without the usual care or formal procedure one might expect in such cases. Instead, it was a raw display of the rage and pain that had built up among those who had suffered under his rule. In that moment, the partisans saw their act as a form of justice, a way to finally erase the mark of his tyranny. But the brutality did not end with his death. After Mussolini was killed, his body was treated with further indignity. His lifeless form was taken and displayed in a public area as a warning to others. In a shocking move, his body was hung upside down on a metal beam. This public display was meant to symbolize the end of his reign and to show that his power had been completely and irreversibly destroyed. It was an act meant to send a strong message that those who abuse power will eventually face a harsh and unmerciful end. The way Mussolini was executed and the treatment of his body left a deep mark on history. Many see this event as one of the most brutal acts of punishment ever recorded. The act of hanging his body was not meant to honor him, but to show the world that no one is above the law. It was a public display of anger and pain that revealed the true feelings of a people who had suffered for too long. His execution was a clear sign that the era of fear and oppression was finally over. The memory of Mussolini's end still causes mixed feelings among people. Some feel that his brutal execution was a fitting end for a man who caused so much pain and suffering. Others believe that such a violent act, even against a tyrant, might have been too extreme. However, for many Italians, the sight of his body hanging in public served as a strong reminder that justice had finally been served. It also marked a new beginning for Italy, a chance to move away from the dark days of fascism and to build a future based on freedom and fairness. The execution of Mussolini remains one of the most shocking and brutal events in history. It teaches us about the cost of power and the need to stand up against oppression. Although his death was violent and harsh, it marked a step toward healing and change for a nation that had suffered under his rule. His end reminds us no one is above the law and justice always prevails. If you're enjoying this deep dive into history, hit the like button to show your support. Don't forget to subscribe for more eye-opening stories from the past. The conspiracy: why was Mussolini killed? In the chaotic final days of World War II, many people in Italy were desperate for an end to the harsh rule of Benito Mussolini. The official story says he was killed because he was a tyrant who caused great harm. However, over the years, questions have been raised about why he was killed and who really wanted him gone. This has led to many theories about a conspiracy behind his execution. At the simplest level, Mussolini was seen as the face of a brutal regime that had oppressed the Italian people for too long. By the time of his capture, the power of his fascist government had crumbled. Many Italians believed that his death was necessary to put an end to years of suffering and to begin healing the wounds of a country torn apart by war. For them, removing Mussolini was a clear way to show that the old order was over and that a new future could begin. Yet, there are theories that suggest his death was not just a simple act of justice by angry partisans. Some believe that powerful groups behind the scenes had their own reasons for wanting him dead. One idea is that Mussolini might have held secret information that could have changed the course of history. If he had been allowed to live, he might have revealed details about the inner workings of his regime, or even secrets about his ties with Nazi Germany. To prevent any chance of such revelations, it is suggested that influential figures made sure his death was swift and final. Another part of the conspiracy theory points to the role of the Allied forces. There are claims that leaders from the Allied countries who were fighting against fascism might have preferred a quick end to Mussolini's life rather than risk a long trial. A trial could have given him a platform to speak and possibly expose further details about how the fascist government operated. By executing him immediately, the Allied powers could ensure that he would not be able to share any more secrets. This theory argues that Mussolini's death was as much about silencing him as it was about punishing him for his crimes. Some historians also suggest that within Italy, a group of political leaders and military officers saw Mussolini as a liability for the future of the country. They believed that his presence, even as a prisoner, could have hindered the formation of a new government. In this view, his execution was part of a larger plan to reshape Italy after the war. By removing Mussolini quickly, these leaders could erase a dark chapter in history and create a clean break from the past. His death, therefore, was not only a punishment for his actions, but also a strategic move to help rebuild the nation. Furthermore, the way in which Mussolini was killed added fuel to the fire of conspiracy theories. He was not given a fair trial or the chance to defend himself in a court of law. Instead, he was captured and executed in a manner that many saw as extrajudicial. This sudden and brutal action made it easier for people to believe that there was a hidden agenda behind his death. When a person in power is killed without a proper legal process, it leaves many questions unanswered. Who really ordered the execution? Were there higher forces at work that decided his fate? These questions have kept the conspiracy theories alive over the years. There is also the idea that Mussolini's execution was used as a message. By killing him in such a public and shocking way, those in charge wanted to send a clear signal to anyone who might try to abuse power in the future. It was a demonstration that no one is above the law, and that cruel actions would be met with harsh consequences. Whether or not this was part of a planned conspiracy, the effect was the same, a strong warning to dictators and tyrants everywhere. In the end, while the official story explains Mussolini's death as a necessary act of justice by a people tired of oppression, the conspiracy theories suggest that there were deeper, more complicated reasons behind it. Was his execution simply an act of revenge, or was it a carefully orchestrated move by powerful forces who wanted to shape Italy's future? The truth remains hidden beneath layers of history and conflicting accounts. What is clear, however, is that his death marked a turning point for Italy, one that signaled the end of a dark era and the start of a long and difficult journey toward rebuilding and reconciliation. The rise of a dictator, Mussolini's early life. Benito Mussolini was born in 1883 in a small town in Italy called Predappio. His early life was far from one of luxury and power. Growing up in a modest household, Mussolini experienced hardships that would later shape his views and ambitions. His father was a blacksmith, a hard-working man who struggled to provide for the family. As a young boy, Mussolini witnessed the everyday challenges of ordinary people. This exposure planted the first seeds of awareness about social injustice and the need for change in a country that was marked by inequality. In his childhood and teenage years, Mussolini was known to be curious and eager to learn. He read many books about history, politics, and society, which helped him form his early ideas about how Italy should be governed. Initially, he was drawn to the socialist movement. Socialism at that time promised a fairer society for all, with a strong focus on helping workers and improving the conditions of the poor. Mussolini believed that through socialism, people could overcome the harshness of life and build a more equal society. However, even as he embraced socialist ideals, he began to notice their limits. He soon realized that simply fighting for equality was not enough to unite a divided nation or to bring Italy the strength it longed for. During his teenage years, while many of his peers were still finding their way, Mussolini was already thinking about the power of a strong leader. He saw that Italy needed more than just ideas. It needed a firm hand that could restore order and instill national pride. This shift in thought marked the beginning of his transformation. While he started his political journey as a socialist, he gradually moved away from these ideas. Mussolini started believing that a centralized, powerful government was the key to national revival. He argued that only through strong leadership could Italy overcome its problems and compete on the world stage. As a young man, Mussolini began to speak out more forcefully about his new vision for Italy. He used his skills as a writer and orator to reach out to people who were tired of the old political ways and desperate for change. His speeches were full of passion and conviction. He talked about the need for unity, discipline, and national pride. These ideas resonated with many Italians who felt left behind by traditional politics. They saw in him a promise of strength and order, a leader who could guide them out of the chaos that had long plagued their country. In his early 20s, Mussolini made a clear decision that would set him on a path to power. He began distancing himself from the socialist movement he once admired. Instead, he started to develop and promote a new ideology that mixed his early ideas of equality with a strong emphasis on nationalism and centralized control. His new stance was radical and bold. Mussolini argued that Italy needed to stand up against its internal weaknesses and external enemies by uniting under a single, powerful leader. This change in direction marked the birth of the fascist ideology that he would later build his political career on. Mussolini's rise was not without obstacles. Many people were skeptical of his changing views, and he faced criticism from both his former socialist allies and traditional political figures. However, his determination and powerful oratory helped him build a following. He organized rallies and public meetings where he shared his vision for a strong, united Italy. His ability to tap into the frustrations and hopes of ordinary Italians played a key role in his growing popularity. His message was simple, yet persuasive. Only a decisive leader could rescue Italy from its many problems. The transformation that took place in Mussolini's early years was critical. The experiences of poverty, the early study of politics, and his gradual shift from socialism to nationalism all contributed to molding him into the leader he would eventually become. His early life was a mix of struggle, learning, and evolving beliefs. These experiences laid the groundwork for his later actions and policies. They show how a man who once sympathized with the plight of the poor could later become the architect of a regime known for its strict control and aggressive nationalism. Mussolini's journey from a curious, hard-working boy to a determined young man with radical ideas is a powerful reminder that early experiences can deeply influence one's beliefs and decisions. His rise was not sudden, but was built over many years of change, reflection, and ambition, a path that eventually led him to become one of history's most notorious dictators. The crimes that sealed his fate. Benito Mussolini's time in power was filled with actions that hurt many people and broke basic human rights. His harsh decisions and brutal methods ultimately sealed his fate. His crimes went far beyond mere political disagreements. They touched on everything from silencing free speech to using violence against his own citizens, and even leading Italy into a devastating war. One of the first and most serious crimes Mussolini committed was the suppression of free speech. When he came to power, he quickly moved to control all forms of communication. Newspapers, radio broadcasts, and public meetings were all turned into tools for his propaganda. This meant that people were not allowed to express their own thoughts or criticize his decisions. Instead, they were forced to listen to the government's version of the truth. This control over information prevented Italians from knowing what was really happening in their country and from speaking out against wrongdoings. Such suppression of free thought is a serious crime because it strips away the very essence of a free society. In addition to controlling speech, Mussolini used fear and violence to keep people in line. He set up secret police units that monitored citizens closely and punished anyone who opposed him. These police were not interested in protecting people or maintaining order. They were there to intimidate and silence dissent. People who dared to protest or criticize his government were often beaten, arrested, or even killed. This use of violence created a climate of terror in Italy. Ordinary people lived in constant fear of being targeted for simply expressing their opinions or asking for change. By using violence as a tool of control, Mussolini not only broke the law, but also inflicted deep psychological wounds on the population. Mussolini's decision to involve Italy in wars was another major crime that led to his downfall. He aligned Italy with other dictators, including Adolf Hitler, and plunged the nation into World War II. The war caused widespread suffering for Italian citizens. Soldiers were sent to fight in battles far from home, and many families lost loved ones. Cities and towns were destroyed, and the economic damage was severe. The cost of the war was paid in blood and tears by the Italian people. Mussolini's reckless decision to go to war not only weakened the country, but also turned public opinion sharply against him. Another crime that sealed Mussolini's fate was the creation of discriminatory laws and policies. His government passed laws that targeted certain groups of people based on their race, religion, or political beliefs. These laws stripped many Italians of their rights and dignity. By dividing the people, Mussolini weakened the social fabric of Italy. The laws created an environment of fear and mistrust, where neighbors no longer felt safe or respected. Discriminatory policies are a serious violation of human rights and contributed greatly to the public's anger toward his regime. Mussolini also relied heavily on propaganda to hide his misdeeds and to control public opinion. The government continuously spread false information about his achievements and the state of Italy. This propaganda machine worked hard to convince people that everything was fine, even as the country was suffering under his rule. By lying to the public, Mussolini was able to maintain his power for a while. However, when the truth finally came out, and the Italian people realized the extent of his crimes, the lies only made his actions seem even worse. Perhaps one of the most damaging aspects of his rule was that Mussolini's decisions were driven by his own ambition and greed. Instead of caring for his country, he cared more about his image and the power he held. His policies and actions were designed to make him look strong and to keep him in control, even if it meant harming thousands of innocent people. This self-serving behavior led many to see him not as a leader, but as a tyrant who put his own desires above the well-being of his nation. The combination of suppressing free speech, using violence and fear, leading Italy into a costly war, enforcing harsh discriminatory laws, spreading propaganda, and being driven by personal ambition created a perfect storm. These crimes left a deep scar on Italy and played a crucial role in Mussolini's eventual downfall. When a leader commits such widespread and serious crimes, it is only a matter of time before the people rise up against him. In Mussolini's case, his actions not only brought suffering to his own people, but also set the stage for his violent end. The crimes that Mussolini committed are remembered as a dark chapter in Italy's history. They remind us that no leader should have unchecked power over the lives of others, and that the abuse of power always has consequences. His brutal actions eventually led to a loss of support and paved the way for his capture and execution. Today, the legacy of Mussolini's crimes serves as a warning. When a leader tramples on human rights and uses cruelty to maintain power, history will not let such actions go unpunished. Mussolini's death marked the end of a dark era in Italy. His brutal execution sent a clear message. No one is above the law, and those who abuse power will face a harsh end. It symbolized the collapse of a regime built on fear and oppression, and it opened the door for Italy to rebuild and move toward a fairer, more open society. If you found this video insightful, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us share more important lessons from history and reminds us to stay vigilant for a better future. Thank you for watching.